The little red LED on the card reader didn't just blink, it sneered. It was a sharp, electronic rejection that echoed louder than the hum of the AC unit overhead, which, by the way, had been rattling like a dying lung for 3 years because director Walter Brandt preferred spending the maintenance budget on team-building retreats to Cabo. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who have mortgages they can't afford and secrets they can't bury. I just stood there, holding my plastic lanyard, looking at the glass doors of Omni Core Solutions like I was inspecting a crime scene that hadn't happened yet. The glass reflected my face, 45 years of practiced neutrality, eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic, and a posture that said middle management but meant ballistics expert. Card trouble, Angela? The voice came from behind me, dripping with the kind of false sympathy you usually find in a divorce lawyer's foyer. It was Murphy, our new chief of security. The title was a joke. Murphy was an ex-cop who got bounced from the force for excessive enthusiasm and now spent his days patrolling a hallway of accountants like he was storming the beaches of Normandy. He smelled like Old Spice and insecurity. "It's red, Murphy," I said, my voice flat. "Usually means the bill wasn't paid or someone pressed the wrong button." "Director wants a word," Murphy said, hooking his thumbs into his tactical belt. He wasn't wearing a gun, just a taser and a flashlight, but he stood like he was packing a howitzer. Escorted entry only. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip, the way his eyes darted to the receptionist, then back to me. He was performing. This was theater. And if you enjoy watching a grown man try to intimidate a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried, literally and metaphorically, you might want to hit that subscribe button because this train wreck is just leaving the station. "Lead the way, brave soldier," I said. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened, that little muscle jumping in his cheek like a trapped insect. He swiped his own badge, a gold-plated monstrosity he definitely paid for himself, and the doors hissed open. The office smelled the way it always did on a Tuesday. Stale coffee, ozone from the copiers, and the low-grade despair of 200 people realizing the weekend was still 4 days away. I walked past the rows of cubicles. Heads popped up like gophers. Cindy from accounting looked away quickly. Dave from logistics suddenly found his stapler fascinating. They knew. In a corporate ecosystem, the smell of blood travels faster than a reply-all email. Murphy marched me past my own office, modest 10 by 10 box where I'd spent 12 years pretending to care about OSHA compliance and diversity and inclusion seminars, and straight toward the mahogany double doors at the end of the hall. The director's suite. Walter Brandt was sitting behind a desk that cost more than my first car. He was flanked by two suits I didn't recognize, corporate legal, probably outsourced, looking like they were carved out of soap and cynicism. Brandt was 50, tanned to the color of a well-oiled baseball mitt, with teeth that were blindingly, aggressively white. "Angela," Brandt said, not standing up. He gestured to a chair that was significantly lower than his own. A classic power move. I remained standing. "Walter," I replied. "Murphy here seems to think I'm a flight risk. He's breathing down my neck so hard I'm worried he's going to propose." Murphy bristled by the door. Brandt offered a tight, condescending smile. "We've decided your services are no longer required, effective immediately." The silence that followed was heavy, textured like a wool blanket in summer. I let it stretch. I wanted to see who would twitch first. It was the lawyer on the left. He shifted his weight and tapped a pen. "Rookie, internal restructuring?" I asked, throwing them the bone they were expecting. "Exactly," Brandt said, looking relieved that I was playing by the script. "We're pivoting. Your role? It's legacy. Archaic. You need fresh eyes on compliance. Someone who understands the modern agility required in federal contracting." Modern agility. That was code for someone who won't notice I'm funneling 6 figures a month into a shell company in the Caymans. "I see," I said. "And the 12 years of institutional knowledge? The audit trails? The delicate relationship with the Department of Labor? We have it covered," Brandt said, waving a hand as if swatting a fly. "HR has your severance package ready. Standard 2 weeks provided you sign the NDA. An NDA, of course. They wanted to buy my silence with the equivalent of a used Honda Civic. I don't think I'll be signing that," I said softly. Brandt's smile faltered. "It's not optional if you want the check, Angela." "I don't want the check, Walter. I want to know if you're sure about this. Really sure. Because once I walk out that door, I can't protect you from what comes next." Brandt laughed. It was a bark of a laugh, sharp and ugly. "Protect me? You plan the fire drills, Angela. You organize the potlucks. You're a glorified hall monitor. I think I'll survive without your protection." He leaned forward, his cologne wafting across the desk, something musky and expensive, masking the scent of rot. "Murphy, escort her out. She has 5 minutes to collect personal effects. No electronics." "Understood," Murphy said, grabbing my elbow. I pulled my arm away. Not violently, just firmly. "Don't touch me." I looked Brandt in the eyes one last time. I was memorizing the arrogance. I wanted to remember exactly how smug he looked, sitting on his throne of lies, thinking he was the king of the jungle. He didn't know he was just a termite in a house that was already fumigated. "Goodbye, Walter," I said. As Murphy marched me back through the gauntlet of staring coworkers, I didn't feel humiliation. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, jagged shard of anticipation in my gut. It was the feeling of a sniper adjusting for windage. They thought they were taking out the trash. They didn't realize they were unplugging the containment unit. I walked out into the parking lot, the sun glaring off the asphalt. Murphy stood at the glass doors, watching me to make sure I got in my car. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my real badge, the one tucked deep inside my wallet, one with the silver sticker on the back. I got into my sedan, started the engine, and checked the rearview mirror. Murphy was still there, arms crossed, looking proud. "Enjoy the victory lap, boys," I whispered to the empty car, "because you just triggered the apocalypse. My apartment is a sterile sanctuary. No cats, no live, laugh, love signs, no clutter. Just mid-century modern furniture that looks uncomfortable because it is, and a stillness that would make a monk nervous. It's the exact opposite of the chaotic, sticky mess of incompetence I just left behind at Omnicore. I kicked off my sensible heels, the ones I bought specifically because they make no noise on linoleum, and walked straight to the second bedroom. To anyone visiting, it's a guest room. A generic bed, a generic dresser, a generic print of a sailboat on the wall. But if you slide the dresser 3 inches to the left and press the knot in the hardwood floor, panel in the closet creates a faint, satisfying click. I pulled the false back of the closet open. It wasn't a high-tech sci-fi command center with holograms. It was worse. It was paper. Boxes and boxes of paper. Hard drives are seizable. Clouds are hackable. But paper is boring. Paper is heavy. Nobody wants to sift through 12 years of physical invoices, manifest logs, and travel expense reports. Nobody except me. I pulled out a thick black binder labeled Unmapped Asset A7329. This was my life's work. Not the compliance training I pretended to run, but the shadow audit I'd been conducting since the day Walter Brandt first charged a $5,000 consulting fee to a company that didn't exist. I sat on the floor, the binder heavy in my lap. I opened it to the most recent tab. The smell of the office was still in my nose, that unique blend of cheap carpet glue and ambition. I needed to scrub it out. I poured myself a glass of water, no ice, room temperature. Efficient. I booted up my laptop, not the company-issued brick they confiscated, but a custom rig with encryption strong enough to give the NSA a migraine. I logged into a backdoor access portal I'd installed in Omnicore server architecture back in 2018, disguised as a printer driver update. I watched the logs scroll by. They were already scrubbing. Predictable, I muttered. I could see Murphy's login credentials clumsy fumbling through the HR database, deleting my active status, erasing my email archives. He was using a digital sledgehammer when he should have been using a scalpel. He was deleting the records of the files, but not the metadata of the deletion itself. Every time he hit erase, he was leaving a fingerprint that said, "I have something to hide." But the real beauty was what they missed. 6 months ago, I noticed Brandt was getting greedy. He wasn't just skimming off the top anymore, he was gouging chunks out of the hull. He had set up a new vendor, Apex Logistics, to handle shipping for a massive defense contract. Apex Logistics was just Brandt's brother-in-law with a P.O. box in Delaware. I knew if I moved too soon, they'd shred everything. So I became part of the rot. I created a ghost. I navigated to the vendor list on my screen. There it was, buried deep in the subcontractor tier, Veridian Tactical Supplies. Veridian didn't exist. I had created the LLC using the same shell company templates Brandt used. I had routed the paperwork through his own rubber stamp approval process. He signed it without reading, just like he signed everything that promised a kickback. But here's the twist. Veridian Tactical Supplies was the only vendor in the system that was fully, 100% compliant with Federal Oversight Regulation 44B. And Regulation 44B requires an automated, external backup of all communication involving the vendor. By signing that contract, Brandt had legally authorized a redundant server to copy every single email, invoice, and Slack message he sent regarding the project. He thought he was approving another slush fund. He was actually signing a warrant for his own digital wiretap. I checked the status of the Veridian server. It was humming along beautifully, capturing everything. I saw a new email from Brandt to his personal lawyer, timestamped 20 minutes ago. Subject, "The bitch is gone. Body, we're clear." Murphy walked her out. "Scrub the Discord logs just in case, but she doesn't know about the Cayman accounts. We're safe." I took a sip of my tepid water. The arrogance was breathtaking. It was almost art. He truly believed that because I wore cardigans and organized the Secret Santa, I was incapable of understanding complex embezzlement schemes. He thought compliance officer meant doormat. I reached for my phone, a burner prepaid disposable. I dialed a number that didn't appear in any contact list. It rang once. "Status?" a voice asked. No greeting, just a gravelly baritone that sounded like it had been gargling with asphalt. This was Handler Zero, my contact at the DOJ. "I'm out," I said. "They terminated the cover." "Compromised?" "No," I said, running a finger down the spine of the black binder. "Arrogant. They're cleaning house because they're about to scale up the theft. They think I was just dead weight." "Do we pull the plug?" Zero asked. I looked at the screen at Brandt's email. "We're safe." "Not yet," I said. The anger in my chest was cold, heavy, and solid. It wasn't the fiery rage of a scorned woman, it was the geological pressure of a mountain waiting to crush a miner. They need to feel safe. I want them to relax. I want them to think they've won. Let them spend the weekend high-fiving. Timeline? Give me 48 hours, I said. I have the breadcrumbs laid out. I just need to make sure the rats follow them. You're walking a thin line, Angela. If they realize you have the data, they think my biggest concern right now is filing for unemployment, I interrupted. They don't know I'm the one who built the maze they're running in. 48 hours, Zero said. Then we bring the hammer. No, I corrected him, closing the laptop with a soft snap. I am the hammer. You guys are just the cleanup crew. I hung up. The apartment was silent again. I looked at the binder. I had them dead to rights. But justice isn't just about the verdict, it's about the terror of the realization. I wanted Brant to sweat. I wanted him to wake up in the middle of the night wondering why the air felt thinner. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Walter Brant was pouring a scotch, laughing about the legacy hire he just fired. Drink up, Walter, I whispered. It's the last good drink you're going to have. Memory is a funny thing. Sometimes it's a blur, and sometimes it's 4K video footage with crystal clear audio. For me, it's usually the latter, especially when I'm wearing a wire. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back 5 years. The annual contractors for Kids Gala. A ballroom at the Hyatt Regency that smelled of desperate cologne, hairspray, and prime rib that had been sitting under heat lamps for too long. It was a sea of black ties and sparkly dresses, a room full of people who charged the government $500 for hammer and then patted themselves on the back for buying a table at a charity event. I was there as support staff, which meant I was holding Brant's extra business cards and making sure his wife didn't drink too many martinis before the keynote speech. Walter Brant was in his element. He was 3 scotches deep, his face flushed an alarming shade of crimson, holding court near the ice sculpture of a fighter jet. It's a volume game, boys. Brant was shouting to a circle of sycophants, junior VPs from rival firms who were hoping to catch some of his overflow. You think the margins are in the tech? Hell no. The margins are in the logistics. The padding. I stood about 4 feet away, clutching a clutch that contained a high-fidelity audio recorder disguised as a tube of lipstick. I looked bored. I looked like I was thinking about my cat. In reality, I was angling my purse to capture every syllable. But Walter, one of the junior VPs asked, a kid with gelled hair and fear in his eyes, doesn't the DCA audit the shipping manifests? Brant laughed, slapping the kid on the shoulder hard enough to spill his drink. Audit, son, they don't have the manpower to audit a lemonade stand. You bury the cost in MISC expediting fees. You charge Uncle Sam $800 for a folding chair because it had to be tactically deployed. It's not fraud if they sign the check. The circle laughed. It was a nervous, wet sound. They wanted to be him, but they were terrified of being caught. Brant didn't have that fear. He had the invincibility of a mediocre white man who had failed upwards his entire life. He turned and saw me standing there. His eyes slid over me like I was a piece of furniture. Angela, he bellowed, waving me over, get over here. Tell these boys about the audit last year, the one with the labor hours. I stepped forward, smiling the smile of a flight attendant during turbulence. You mean when you reclassified the janitorial staff as environmental sanitation engineers to bill at a higher tier, sir? The room went quiet for a split second. Brant blinked, then roared with laughter. See? She knows the game. Best damn secretary in the business. Compliance officer. I corrected him in my head. And I'm not playing the game, Walter. I'm refereeing it. She's a vault, Brant slurred, leaning in close to the gelled hair kid, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that the lipstick recorder picked up perfectly. Doesn't talk, doesn't complain, just fixes the paperwork. You need a woman like that, not smart enough to ask questions, but organized enough to hide the answers. Not smart enough. That was the moment. That was the exact second it stopped being just an assignment and became personal. I felt a cold, prickly heat spread across my neck. He didn't see me as a threat because he didn't see me as a person. He saw me as an appliance, a toaster that processed invoices. I kept my smile frozen in place. Shall I get you another drink, sir? The keynote is starting. Yeah, he waved me off. Double. No ice. And make sure my wife is sitting next to the senator, not the stunning blonde from Lockheed. Don't want a scene. I walked to the bar. My hands were steady. I ordered his drink. I looked at the reflection in the mirror behind the bar, the chaotic swirl of the party, the balloons, the For the Kids banner drooping on one side. It was all so grotesque. These people were strip mining the country and calling it patriotism. I took the drink back to him. As I handed it over, I looked at his sweaty, jubilant face. Here you go, sir, I said. Good girl, he muttered, not looking at me. I went home that night and uploaded the audio file to a secure server. I labeled it Evidence Item 049 Admission of Intent. Back in the present, sitting on my floor with the binder, I touched the digital file on my screen. That recording was the cornerstone. It proved intent. It proved he wasn't just negligent, he was predatory. He had called me not smart enough. I closed the binder. Memory didn't hurt anymore, it was fuel. It was high-octane, clean-burning hatred. You should have looked at the resume, Walter, I said to the empty room. I didn't go to community college for business administration. I went to Quantico for forensic accounting. I stood up. My legs were stiff, but my mind was racing. It was time to initiate phase 2. They had the dumb secretary fired. Now they were going to have to deal with the ghost. Tuesday morning brought rain. Not the cleansing kind, but the gray, miserable state drizzle that turns the world into a smudge. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that was vastly superior to the swill in the Omni-Core break room, watching the digital ant farm on my laptop. Brant had brought in cleaners. I could see the network traffic spiking. It was chaotic, sporadic, the digital equivalent of someone running around a room with a shredder, feeding it random documents. My insider in records, Susan, sent me a text via an encrypted messaging app disguised as a Sudoku game. Susan, it's a bloodbath. Murphy is interrogating the interns, asking if they ever saw you with a flash drive. Me, tell him I used to eat flash drives for lunch. Good for fiber. Susan, lol. Seriously though, they brought in some outside IT guy. Looks like he lives in his mom's basement, wearing a Crypto King t-shirt. Crypto King? Perfect. Brant had hired a discount hacker. I tapped into the internal security camera feed. I still had access to the camera in the hallway outside the server room because they hadn't changed the default factory password in 8 years. I watched as a young guy with a majestic neckbeard and a hoodie plugged a laptop into the main switch. He was trying to wipe the server logs. I could tell because the system performance dropped by 40%. He was running a brute force deletion script. It was sloppy. It was noisy. Oh, honey, I whispered, watching him on my screen. You're not wiping the data, you're just hiding the shortcuts. He was deleting the pointers to the files, but the data blocks themselves were still sitting on the hard drives, waiting to be recovered by anyone with a basic understanding of forensics. But let them think it's gone. Confidence is their weakness. Then Murphy walked into the frame. He was pacing, yelling at the IT kid. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read the body language. Murphy was panicked. He was pointing at the server rack, making chopping motions with his hand. Cut it, kill it. My phone buzzed again. Susan, Murphy is calling ex-employees. He just called Dave from 3 years ago asking if you ever talked about Cayman or offshore accounts. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Murphy was doing my work for me. By calling around and asking specific questions about offshore accounts, he was confirming to everyone that there were offshore accounts. He was spreading the rumors faster than I ever could. Keep digging, Murphy, I murmured. You're digging your own grave. I decided to help them out. I opened a terminal window and executed a small script I'd written weeks ago. It was a breadcrumb, a digital trail. The script created a sudden, localized activity spike in a dormant folder on the shared drive. The folder was labeled Archive 2020 Personal. It was empty except for one file, a receipt for a pizza I ordered 3 years ago. But to the Crypto King monitoring the network, that spike would look like a data exfiltration in progress. On the camera feed, I saw the IT kid jump. He pointed at his screen. Murphy rushed over, his face turning the color of boiled ham. They were panicking. They thought I was inside the system, stealing data right now. I wasn't. I was sitting 5 miles away eating toast. Murphy grabbed his radio. He started shouting. The IT kid was typing furiously, trying to block the intruder. He initiated a system-wide lockdown. Access denied. The entire Omnicore network went dark. Email, phones, shared drives, everything. The IT kid had panicked and pulled the plug on his own company. I leaned back in my chair and, seen, now they were blind, they couldn't communicate, couldn't trade files, and most importantly, they couldn't process payments. I picked up my phone and texted Susan. Me, why is the email down? Susan, you are evil. The IT guy is crying. Brant just screamed so loud a vein popped in his forehead. This was the grime I lived for. The muddy, messy reality of corporate incompetence. They thought they were playing 4D chess, but they were actually just eating the pieces. But the fun was just starting. While they were running around in the dark, trying to reboot their servers, I prepared the physical package. A simple manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. A printout of the Viridian Tactical Supplies vendor agreement signed by Walter Brandt, and highlighted in neon yellow, Clause 44B, mandatory external data redundancy. I wasn't going to send it to Brandt. That would be too kind. I addressed the envelope to the senior compliance officer at Raytheon, Omnicore's biggest client, the client that accounted for 80% of their revenue. I sealed the envelope. The glue tasted like victory. Phase 3, I said to the empty room. Let's see how they handle the light. The coffee shop across the street from Omnicore, the Daily Grind, had terrible acoustics and even worse bagels, but it had a perfect view of the lobby. I sat in a booth by the window, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like I was dodging paparazzi, though really I was just dodging former coworkers who might come in for latte. It was 10 o'clock a.m. on Wednesday. The blog post had gone live at 9:45 a.m. It wasn't the New York Times. Not yet. It was a niche industry watchdog blog called the Federal Ledger. Small, but read by everyone who mattered in DC contracting circles. Title: Midwest contractor linked to ghost vendors and inflated logistics costs. It didn't name Omnicore directly. It cited sources close to the investigation and mentioned a mid-sized firm in Ohio. but it included a redacted screenshot of an invoice. An invoice for tactical folding chairs at $800 a pop. I watched the lobby through the window. It started slowly. A receptionist looked at her phone, frowned, and whispered to the guard. Then a suit walked by, checked his BlackBerry. Yes, some of them still used Blackberries, and stopped dead in his tracks. By 10:15, the lobby was a hive of agitated insects. I saw Brant storm through the glass doors, phone glued to his ear. He looked disheveled. His tie was slightly askew. He was shouting at someone on the other end. Probably the PR firm he kept on retainer for reputation management, which was really just a guy named Chad who knew how to delete Yelp reviews. My burner phone buzzed. It was Zero. We have movement, Zero said. Raytheon just flagged Omnicore's vendor status. They're pausing payments pending a review. Fast, I said, blowing on my coffee. The envelope must have arrived. Brant is calling in favors, Zero continued. He's trying to reach Senator Klein. Klein isn't taking the call. Of course he isn't. Klein can smell a corpse from 3 states away. He won't attach himself to a sinking ship. Are you ready for extraction? Zero asked. We can pull you in. Deposition is ready. I watched Murphy run across the lobby, literally run, waving a piece of paper. He looked like a man trying to catch a bus that had already left. Not yet, I said. I want them to sweat a little longer. I want them to turn on each other. Angela, this is dangerous. If they figure out you're the source. They suspect, I said, but they don't know. They think I'm just a disgruntled ex-employee leaking petty grievances. They don't know I'm a DOJ asset. If they knew that, they'd be running for the border, not calling PR. Don't get cocky. I'm not cocky, I'm patient. I hung up. Inside the building, the lights on the second floor, the executive suite, were blazing, even though it was bright daylight. I could imagine the scene. Brant screaming about leaks. Murphy interrogating the janitors. The lawyers trying to figure out which shredder was the fastest. I took a bite of my stale bagel. It tasted like cardboard, but in that moment it was the best meal of my life. Then I saw it, the first crack in the facade. Linda, Brant's executive assistant, a woman who had defended him for 15 years, a woman who had lied to his wife about his late nights at the office, walked out the front door. She wasn't carrying a box. She was carrying her purse and a potted plant. She stopped on the sidewalk, looked back at the building and spat, actually spat on the concrete. Then she walked to her car and drove away. The rats were leaving. Linda knew she had seen the invoices. She had probably typed half of them. If she was leaving, it meant Brant was trying to pin it on her. Mistake, Walter, I whispered. Never sacrifice the secretary. We know where the skeletons are because we're the ones who buried them. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to a number I hadn't used in years. Linda's personal cell. Me, if you want immunity, go to the diner on 5th. Ask for Agent Miller. Don't go home. I saw the message change to read. 10 seconds later, thank you, I smiled. Brant had just lost his firewall. Linda would sing. She would sing like a canary in a coal mine. I finished my coffee. The air in the cafe smelled of burnt beans and rain, but to me, it smelled like justice. It was time for the next step. They were panicked, confused, and bleeding. Now I needed to show them exactly who held the knife. I stood up, adjusted my coat, and walked out into the rain. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I was going to walk right into the lion's den. I parked my sedan in my old spot. It was still empty. Nobody had dared to take it yet, as if the ghost of my compliance audits still haunted the asphalt. I walked toward the building. The rain had stopped, leaving the world slick and gray. My heart wasn't racing. My palms weren't sweaty. I felt a strange, icy clarity. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times during boring budget meetings. I reached the glass doors. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Sarah who spent 90% of her day watching TikToks, looked up. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed the phone. She's here, I heard her whisper shout. Murphy, she's here. I didn't stop. I pushed through the doors. The lobby was cooler than outside, the air conditioned to a sterile chill. Murphy came bursting out of the elevator bank like a bull seeing red. He was flushed, sweaty, and his tie was definitely stained with mustard. You, he shouted, pointing a finger at me. You are trespassing. I have a restraining order pending. You need to leave immediately or I will physically remove you. He was loud. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted to show the terrified staff peering over the balcony that he was the alpha. I stopped in the center of the lobby. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get aggressive. I just stood there, hands in my trench coat pockets. I don't think you want to do that, Murphy, I said. My voice was calm, carrying easily over the hush that had fallen over the room. I'm warning you, Murphy advanced, hand hovering near his taser. Get out. I'm here to return something, I said. Don't want your garbage. Get out. He was 3 feet away now, close enough for me to smell the stale coffee on his breath. He reached out to grab my arm. Don't, I said. It wasn't a request, it was a command. He hesitated. Something in my eyes stopped him. The predator, instinct deep in his lizard brain, realized too late that he wasn't looking at a gazelle. He was looking at a viper. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I was holding a leather badge wallet, not the cheap plastic clip-on Omnicore issued. A real leather wallet. You wanted my badge, I said. Here, I held it out. Murphy sneered. What is this, a toy? He snatched it from my hand. He flipped it open. He froze. He stared at the gold shield, the eagle, the engraving, Department of Justice. His eyes bulged. He looked up at me, then back at the badge. His brain was trying to process the information, trying to reconcile Angela, the compliance lady, with federal agent. Turn it over, I said softly. He obeyed, his hands shaking slightly. On the back was a silver holographic sticker. Code A7329, asset do not detain. Federal obstruction charges apply. Murphy made a sound like a deflating tire. He dropped the badge. It hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. He physically recoiled, stepping back as if the leather wallet was radioactive. I didn't, he stammered. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of pasty white. Brant said you were just? Brant lied, I said. I bent down and picked up the badge, dusting it off calmly. Brant lies about everything. You should know that by now, Murphy. The lobby was dead silent. Sarah, the receptionist, had her hand over her mouth. The staff on the balcony were frozen statues. Is he upstairs? I asked. Murphy nodded. He couldn't speak. It looked like he was about to vomit. Good, I said. Tell him he has 1 hour. 1 hour? Murphy squeaked. 1 hour to call the U.S. Attorney and confess, I said, tucking the badge back into my pocket. If he does, he might get minimum security. Maybe a facility with a tennis court. If he makes us come up there and get him, he goes to the dark place. I turned my back on him. I didn't need to see his face to know I had broken him. I walked toward the exit. Click-clack of my heels, the only sound in the cavernous room. Angela, Murphy called out, his voice trembling. What about me? I was just following orders. I stopped at the door and looked back over my shoulder. Then you better hope your orders were in writing, Murphy, I said. Because I was just following orders hasn't been a valid defense since 1945. I walked out. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. Phase 4 complete. The rat was trapped. Now came the extermination. I didn't leave the property. I sat on a bench near the fountain in the corporate plaza, watching the building. It was a beautiful piece of architecture, glass, steel, and hubris. 30 minutes later, the cavalcade arrived. They didn't come with sirens wailing. That's for movies. Real federal raids are quiet, coordinated swarms. 4 black SUVs pulled up to the curb in perfect unison. 12 agents in windbreakers marked FBI and DOJ stepped out. Leading them was Agent Miller, a tall, severe man who looked like he ironed his socks. He spotted me on the bench and gave a curt nod. I stood up and joined the phalanx. We walked into the lobby. Murphy was nowhere to be seen. He was probably in the bathroom, hyperventilating. The receptionist, Sarah, was weeping softly into a tissue. Secure the exits, Miller said to his team. Nobody leaves with electronics. Seize the servers first. 6 agents peeled off toward the server room. Miller and I, flanked by 4 others, headed for the elevator. The ride up to the executive floor was silent. The elevator music was a soft jazz cover of Don't Stop Believin'. The irony was almost too much. When the doors opened, the chaos hit us. People were shredding paper. I could hear the mechanical whir-grind-whir from every cubicle. Federal agents. Step away from your desks, Miller shouted. His voice was a cannon blast. The shredding stopped. Hands shot up. We marched down the hall to the double mahogany doors. Locked, of course. Miller looked at me. Key, he changed the locks this morning, I said. Kick it. Miller nodded to the agent on his right. One swift kick, right near the handle. The wood splintered, the door swung open. Walter Brant was sitting at his desk. He wasn't working. He was staring at the wall. His tie was on the floor. A bottle of scotch was open on the desk, half empty. He looked up at us. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. He looked 20 years older than he had 2 days ago. You, he croaked, looking at me. You were the leak. I wasn't a leak, Walter, I said, stepping into the room. I was the plumbing. Another agent walked in carrying a heavy silver briefcase. He placed it on the conference table and clicked it open. Inside were stacks of files, hard drives, audio logs. This, I said, gesturing to the case, is every illegal transaction you've made since 2012. Every inflated invoice. Every bribe to a zoning commissioner. Every penny you stole from the Veterans Fund to pay for your mistress's condo in Boca. Brant's face twitched. You can't prove intent. It was accounting errors. My team, we have the audio, Walter, I said softly. The gala. It's not fraud if they sign the check, remember. His face went slate gray. He remembered. And we have Linda, I added. She's with the U.S. attorney right now. She kept a backup of your calendar, even the private appointments. Brant slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. He wasn't a titan of industry anymore. He was just a thief in a suit. Who are you? He whispered. You made coffee. You organized the Secret Santa. I'm Asset A7329, I said. And the coffee was decaf. For 12 years, I thought you needed to calm down. Miller stepped forward with cuffs. Walter Brant, you are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States government, wire fraud, and money laundering. As they pulled his hands behind his back, Brant looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just confusion. He still couldn't understand how the furniture had come to life and eaten him. Why? He asked. Why wait so long? Because I said, leaning in close, I wanted to see how high you would build the tower before I kicked out the foundation. They marched him out. I stayed in the office. I looked around at the opulent decor, the leather chairs, the signed sports memorabilia, the view of the city. It all smelled of rot. I walked over to his desk and picked up the bottle of scotch. I poured the contents into the potted ficus tree in the corner. Drink up, I said to the plant. It's on the house. The next 3 hours were a blur of procedure. The building was designated a crime scene. Yellow tape went up over the cubicles. Agents were boxing up computers, tagging files, and interviewing weeping employees. I sat in a small conference room, the ideation zone, Brandt had called it, with Agent Miller and a woman from the Inspector General's office. The contracts are suspended, the woman said, tapping on her tablet. Raytheon pulled out completely. Omnicore is effectively dead in the water. Stocks are frozen. Good, I said. I was tired. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull ache behind my eyes. You did good work, Angela Miller said. He pushed a file across the table. We have a new assignment for you, a defense contractor in Virginia. They've been showing some irregularities in their drone program. We need a new compliance officer. I looked at the file. It was another 12 years, another fake life, another decade of pretending to be invisible, of listening to mediocre men brag about their crimes, of drinking bad coffee and wearing cardigans. I pushed the file back. No, I said. Miller frowned. No, you're one of our best assets. You have the profile. I'm done, I said. I'm retiring. You're 45, Miller said. You can't retire. Watch me, I said. I have a pension. I have savings. And I have 12 years of vacation time I never took because I was too busy bugging Brandt's office. Miller looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. He closed the file. I can't say I blame you. This one? It was deep, I agreed. It was rotting from the inside out. We're lifting the press embargo in an hour, the woman from the IG said. The story will hit the AP, Reuters, CNN. Whistleblower exposes massive defense fraud. Do you want your name attached? Absolutely not, I said. Keep me as anonymous source. I don't want a book deal. I just want my life back. They nodded. They understood. In our line of work, fame is dangerous. Silence is safety. I stood up. Am I clear to go? You're clear, Miller said. He stood up and extended a hand. Thank you, Angela. The taxpayers owe you one. The taxpayers can keep the change, I said, shaking his hand. I walked out of the conference room and into the main office floor. It was strange. The hum was gone. The phones weren't ringing. The copier wasn't whirring. It was just silent. The employees were huddled in groups, whispering. They watched me pass. Some looked angry. They knew I was the reason they were losing their jobs. Others looked relieved. They knew the toxic culture was finally over. I saw Cindy from accounting. She had been kind to me in her own way. She had shared her lunch with me once. Angela, she asked, her voice small. Is it true? About the fraud? I stopped. It's true, Cindy. All of it. What happens to us? She asked. File for unemployment, I said gently. And then you find a job at a company that doesn't steal from veterans. You'll be okay, Cindy. You're good at math. I kept walking. I didn't want to do the emotional labor of comforting them. I wasn't their mother. I was the surgeon who had just cut out the tumor. The recovery was up to them. I walked past my old cubicle. My hang in their cat poster was still on the wall. I ripped it down and tossed it in the trash. I hung in there. I whispered, and look where it got us. I reached the elevators. The doors opened with a ding. I stepped in and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, shutting out the sight of the crime scene I had engineered, I felt a weight lift off my chest. 12 years, it was over. The lie was finished. I wasn't Angela the compliance officer anymore. I was just Angela. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what happened next. That was the most exciting feeling in the world. The lobby was empty of agents now, except for 2 guarding the front door. But standing near the reception desk, looking like a lost child in a mall, was Murphy. He wasn't wearing his tactical belt anymore. He was holding a cardboard box containing a stapler and a potted succulent. He had been fired. Security chiefs who let the DOJ raid the building don't tend to keep their jobs. He saw me coming out of the elevator. He flinched. I walked straight up to him. He looked at his shoes. Angela, he mumbled. Save it, Murphy, I said. You played the part. You were the bully. Every tragedy needs a villain's henchman. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the leather badge wallet, the real one, the one that had terrified him 3 hours ago. Here, I said, holding it out. He looked at it with horror. I can't take that. That's federal property. I'm resigning, I said, and I don't want to fill out the paperwork. Give it to Agent Miller when he comes down. Tell him I left it for the file. Murphy reached out with a trembling hand. He took the badge. He held it by the edges gingerly as if it were burning hot, as if the truth inside it was too heavy for him to carry. File it wherever you like, I said, or throw it in the river. I don't care. I don't need a badge to know who I am anymore. At that moment, the elevator doors behind me opened again. 2 agents walked out, escorting Walter Brandt. He was in handcuffs. His expensive Italian suit jacket was draped over his wrists to hide the steel, but everyone knew what was under there. He looked shattered. The tan was gone, replaced by a gray pallor. He stopped when he saw me. The agents paused, letting the moment hang in the air. Brandt looked at me. Then he looked at Murphy holding my badge. Then he looked back at me. You. He started, his voice raspy. You were a ghost. You were never really here, were you? I looked him in the eye. I was the only thing in this building that was real, Walter. Everything else was a receipt for something you couldn't afford. I didn't wait for response. I turned and walked toward the glass doors. Angela, he called out, a desperate, pathetic sound. Who's going to handle the audit next month? I didn't look back. I just laughed. A real laugh. I pushed through the doors and stepped out into the Ohio afternoon. The sun had finally broken through the clouds completely. The wet pavement shone like silver. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and wet dirt, the smell of the real world. I walked to my car. I didn't look at the building. I didn't look at the window where I had wasted 12 years of my life. I got in, started the engine, and rolled down the window. I took a deep breath. No more invoices. No more fake smiles. No more Director Brandt. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the lot. I didn't just survive Omnicore. I dismantled an empire with a sticker, a binder, and the patience of a saint with a sniper rifle. And the best part? No one saw me coming, not until it was already too late. I merged onto the highway, turned up the radio, and drove. I wasn't going home. I was going anywhere but here. Arrogance blinds the powerful every single time. Angela's patience and strategic reveal, through a simple sticker, dismantled an entire operation. It's a sharp reminder true power isn't always loud or flashy. Often, it's the quiet, meticulous force, perfectly timed. Never mistake someone's calm demeanor for weakness. Always respect the depth beneath the surface. Appreciate you all for joining us on this masterful tale.